So let's start. Hi, I'm Renee Hobbs. Welcome to, wow, EDC 534 spring semester. We are steaming so close to the end of the semester. And I am here with some amazing graduate students. This is a course that's part of the certificate in digital literacy at the University of Rhode Island. And this week we're kind of trying to pull some themes together, right? And so let me just share my screen with you and we'll talk a little bit about what we're doing, right? Let me see if I can make this work. I have been grading. My grading is so out of control behind and craziness, but that's part of my grieving process. Grading is hard. But I am now almost finished reading your LEAP 4. You should have gotten feedback on your LEAP 3. And if you didn't, you should email me. But I'm through with the LEAP 4 hit record essays, and I am so impressed. What a courageous process you went into, figuring out if and how you could share your identity as a photographer, as a poet, as an artist, as a voice talent, and many more. Most of you did, I think, some of your best writing for this piece of the course because your leaps generally took the form of a story, which is, what did you experience in that creative community and what did you learn about yourself? So I actually feel like after reading your LEAP 4s, I have a much better understanding of how you see yourself as creative people and in what ways this class has challenged your understanding of your creative identity, how you're thinking about creativity in relation to your work, in relation to teaching and learning, and in relation to digital competencies. It was a pleasure, and of course, why it's been fun and hard to grade LEAP 4 is that when you reference your creative work, I have to go in and comment and look at your creative work. And so there's some really wonderful stories that are emerging from that. Somebody in this class posted a challenge, and when she ended the essay, she said, well, I posted this challenge and who knows whether anybody will take it up. And of course, 2 weeks later, I go clicking on that challenge and 15 people have responded to somebody's challenge in this class. And so I thought, well, so clearly 534, EDC 534 students have continued to fertilize that creative community. Long after you've moved on, people are still learning from and sharing on work that you have created. So that just warms my heart. And it makes me think a lot about how I try to create community in my classroom and what's hard about doing that, and when I'm successful and when I'm not successful, community in the context of a classroom. But you clearly experienced something about the nature of like dipping into a community. And so that was really thrilling to me. Okay, so maybe what we could do, I definitely want to get a little tiny bit of, I want to get a little bit of tiny, like, how's life progress report, because as they say in higher education, April is the cruelest month. It can bring on insanity, right? It can. So we have to stay hopeful and remind ourselves of the amazing good things that are all around us. So let's start with Tori, because I think you have some good news to share.
Oh, yes, I passed my comps exams and my oral defense. So, woohoo!
Now, many people don't know what you're talking about. So could you translate that into English?
Oh, that's right. Okay. So I'm in the communication program at URI, obviously, and part of our requirements to graduate is we have to have either you do a thesis or you can do the exam. And I chose the, oh gosh, sorry, my dog. I chose to do the exams, and I had a question from each area of communication studies, and then I had to defend my answers to my committee. And Dr. Hobbs was actually my major professor, and I was okay enough to pass. So thank you for passing me.
She wrote a lot of pages under deadline pressure, and she held her own in a 2-hour conversation with academics who were trying to wield their swords. It was quite thrilling.
It was fun.
Okay, so thank you for sharing your good news. That means you're going to graduate, and what a wonderful thing it was to see you move through that process so skillfully. Mary Wallace, you also just shared, before we got on the recording, you just shared some amazing good news. Can you tell us the story, please?
Yeah, I have a benefactor who has graciously, even though he has made me jump through many hoops along the way, including a presentation, a proposal, follow up to all that, has graciously, I guess, agreed, given his approval to funding a media center at our high school, which will include a video production studio and an audio production lab and a completely updated Adobe lab. So we'll have all of the Adobe Suite Creative Cloud for our kids, including, and some cool tools, some digital tablets and drones and some of the coolest, latest stuff, and which we haven't had. And I'm just so thrilled to be able to bring this to our kids, because I think we've done a disservice to them. We've kind of set them out there in communication programs where other schools have had this kind of, advantage, and ours have been at a disadvantage and have succeeded in spite of it. So imagine what they'll be able to do with it. I'm just so excited. So yay! And I have to have it done by September.
No pressure. No
pressure.
That's a great credit to your great communication and leadership skills, Mary. So what great news.
Thanks.
Now, I'm dying to hear other good news, because tonight is a good news roundup. And no matter what is going on in your life, no matter how stressful it is, you have some good news to share. So who's next?
Can you guys see me? It's Marie. You still can't see me?
Yeah, we can see you perfectly.
Oh, all right, because I can't see myself. But I have no good news. I just wanted to know if you could see me.
A little bit of good news?
None. I'm in the weeds. I'm beyond stressed out. I still haven't even heard about my comps exam yet, if I passed or not. I took it, obviously, like 3 weeks ago, and I still haven't heard anything.
Okay, so no good news for you. But Dan, I saw your hand. You have some good news?
Just a little. So next year will be my 19th year teaching. And the way the schedule worked out for next year, I'm going to end up with 5 sections of honors classes. So that's never happened before.
Nice. So the scheduling gods have smiled on you. 5 sections of honors. There is nothing wrong with that. No. Oh, what a delight. Donna, Vanessa, Hong Yan, what little bit of good news have you had in the last week since I last saw you? There's got to be something in the middle of all this craziness. Hong Yan, turn your microphone on.
Yes. The good news is we just spent Easter Sunday and then Good Friday, and then we went to church, and everything is perfect at the moment, and my son is so well behaved lately, so I'm so happy about that. So he was a good listener for lately. He was very good listener, so I'm happy about that, and I can concentrate on my work, and I'm happy about that too.
Yeah, so the balance of life and family, when it's in balance, it's a beautiful thing. Donna, Vanessa. Tiny bit of good news somewhere. Donna.
Well, kind of the rainbow at the end of the cloud. I am the Chromebook queen at the high school, and I've had a backlog of broken devices because they're 3-year-old laptops and high school students don't necessarily take good care of them. But we are clearing the backlog, and it has gotten so bad that the superintendent actually stepped in and called and yelled at the insurance company. And so I will take the support from wherever I can get it. And mysteriously, 15 repair labels appeared today. Yay! So
Yes. So isn't that weird? So just at the point when you're slogging, then boom, 15 of them now get to be shipped off to the repair person or wherever they go and off of your to-do list.
absolutely.
That's good news. Now, Vanessa, you've got some good news to share. What is it?
I'm afraid I'm going to jinx it, but I think my household is finally free of the stomach bug. That's really like the best thing that's happening right now. I feel like I can finally maybe breathe and put away the bleach for 5 seconds.
Great. Well, you know, spring is the season, isn't it? Spring is the season. And once you get that illness, and the whole family gets that illness, right? So glad to hear, fingers crossed, that it's over. Right. Well, wonderful. I'm so aware of how at this time of the year, with all the stresses that come toward the end of the semester, that taking a breath and reflecting on the blessings and the good things and the little bit of progress. Yeah, of course, I am celebrating the release of my colleague Sait Tuzel from Turkish prison. I'm still celebrating. And just a few days ago, we were able to have a real work meeting with him. Like he's now back in our community. He's part of our creative community, and he's back on the team, and he's working. And so for me, he's just such a thought leader and somebody whose ideas help me so much that I'm just really grateful that he's back. And I'm sad that the people of Turkey voted to give more powers to the dictator Erdogan. I'm sad about that. That decision happened yesterday, but I'm grateful that Said, my Turkish friend, is still in my community, still in my life. Okay, so James, welcome, James. James, we see your neck, but we'd love to see your face. And you know what we're sharing right now, James? We're talking about a tiny bit of good news. We've got 8 students on the call, and we're thinking about how, as crazy as it is, we're still finding ways to find good news. James, do you have any good news to share with the EDC 534 students? Good news that's happened to you or you've experienced in the last, week or 2?
Well, I'll go with, I did a lot of gardening work. So I did a lot of gardening work after the last several years. Varmints have gotten in and destroyed my gardens, and I'm trying to figure out a way to combat them. So I overhauled my entire garden, took out a massive tree stump that's probably 700 pounds, broke it up, and created a nice artifact out of it. So after 3 years, I'm finally going to have a successful garden, and a lot of trial and error, and that's my good news. That's
actually that's a really good example of creative destruction, right?
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes you have to destroy to create, right?
Yeah.
So glad to hear that you're doing great. Okay, so I'm sharing my screen with you. We're basically going to just do a little. Why is that not working? Hold on a second. I'm trying to share my screen and realizing that I don't have a window open. So what's the point of sharing with you? So what I want to do is do a little bit of reflection on the three, these were really the last three readings for the course, right? Let's see now, I'm going to try to share my screen. And you guys did some pretty good summaries of the ideas that we were working on. And so I thought what we could do is take a look at these 4 questions and just do a little small group discussion and a little large group discussion about these 4 topics. So you remember that we read 3 articles. We read, you read one of the 3 choices here. Jean Burgess's piece called Hearing Ordinary Voices. The second piece we read was by a guy named Robert Petrone called Linking Contemporary Research on Youth Literacy and Popular Culture with Literacy Teacher Education. And the third piece that you might have read is by Howard Rheingold, who was our keynote speaker a couple of years ago for the Summer Institute, called Using Participatory Media and Public Voice to Encourage Civic Engagement. I started making some comments a little bit on your writing and finding myself, I don't know, being a little bit reflective around what we know and what we don't know. As we come to the end of the course, it's always good to think a little bit about that, is what do we know and what don't we know? So how about these 4 questions for a little bit of a group discussion? How do authors and readers make sense of the relationship between language and images as we engage in screen reading practices? You remember this is your response to the video by the author, Rachel Cohen, who was talking a little bit about how her work as a writer is changing now in the digital era. What are some positive and potential positive and negative consequences to the rise of ordinary voices in contemporary culture? Jean Burgess says it's great that ordinary voices are becoming more a part of our culture. What are the positive and potentially negative consequences to that rise? In responding to Robert Petrone, I wondered, what is popular culture? And why should it be a part of literacy education? And then for Howard Rheingold, well, he says it's not sufficient for people to simply participate in digital culture. So why does he say that? What does it mean? And do you agree or disagree with him? So what we're going to do is spend about 6 minutes in just a one-on-one dialogue with you and a partner. Maybe it'll be a small group of 3. And I'll ask you to choose one of those questions. It's possible that the person who's in the room with you didn't read the same thing you read, right? Because you got to choose which piece you wanted to read. So you're probably going to have to do a little bit of summarizing before you tackle the question. Right? So you might need to take a few minutes to summarize, and then you're going to tackle the question, talk about that question for a few minutes, and then we'll come back as a large group and see what insights, what big ideas emerged. Give me a thumbs up if you're aware of what's going to be happening now and you're ready for breakout rooms. Here they come. So I think that's going to work. The breakout rooms are open. We'll take about 7 or 8 minutes. So join those breakout rooms now. Okay, it's kind of cool to watch you guys all kind of coming back from the break. So let's just go around the room and talk a little bit about what ideas came up in your small group discussion. And if you were going to try to synthesize a key idea or two that was relevant or meaningful or interesting to you, what is it? Who wants to go first?
I'll go first.
Thank you. Vanessa.
Dan Riley and I talked about the first question about the video with, is it Rachel Cohen? And we talked about the sort of digital authorship. She found that people on the Kindle actually responded better or better understood what she was trying to understand because she could illustrate things in a different way. And so we sort of talked about the educational level of that. So I said it kind of reminds me of tools that young readers use nowadays, like the leapfrogs, where there's like a pen that helps you read, right, when you're learning if you don't know a word, or even online there are certain websites and stuff that are very interactive for kids when they're learning to read. And that level of interaction is a great way to educate someone, right? And so even though this article wasn't within a school setting, it was, I think she said in the New Yorker, the readers were able to become better informed with the level of interaction. And we also talked about how some people just learn differently. So someone who's a visual person being able to interact with a visual was a better way for them to understand the information. Or even people who are hands-on learners being able to interact with something was a better way for them to retain the information.
Great observation about this idea of how what is interaction and how absolutely important it is to the learning process, right? And we sometimes think of reading as a solitary practice, but if we're doing reading right, we are interacting.
Right.
And so now digital devices allow us to, instantiate that interaction in different ways. Thanks for kicking it off, Vanessa. Other key ideas that came out of your little small group discussion. What'd you talk about and what ideas were meaningful for you too? Dan.
So I had read Burgess and Donna had read Patron. And so that was a good conversation to see how those were almost symmetrical or maybe like good compliments to each other, because I had pulled out of the Burgess definitely was very positive. And one of the things that she'd written about, like before getting to mass culture, was folk culture. And I had mentioned how that was something that was done by Ralph Vaughan Williams about 100 years ago when he went around the whole English countryside. And then from there, he took all the tunes that he heard the oldest person in each village singing, and he put them all into the English hymnal. And that became a classic, for that particular time period. And it had some lasting value because it was part of the whole folk consciousness. And whereas Donna had read the Patron, and it raises some good questions there about, so to speak, about not just what comes up from the ground up, but really what's given from whatever the powers that could be, corporate in terms of the products that they sell us, and how much are we supposed to be gatekeepers or filters. And Donna and I have a common experience of both having had, taught at religious schools. So we both have to ask, how much of the world do we keep out? Right. And at the same time, if we keep it all out, how do we avoid very important questions for our students, for them to tackle, because they can't maintain that innocence and naivete.
Wow, so many really interesting ideas there, and especially I appreciate your making the connection between Burgess's thinking about pop culture as a continuation or a reinvention of folk culture, right? Because the way we respond to popular culture, we appropriate it and we rework it to make it meet our needs. But boy, oh boy, Patron has some real anxieties. And he says when he introduces the idea of teaching popular culture in the classroom to his pre-service teachers, they go, holy hell, are you kidding? You want me to teach all that literature and popular culture? And what if I get fired? Right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. The filters for everybody.
Yeah. Complicated. And especially in the context of a religious school, even more complicated because of the point you just made, which is you can't protect these kids completely, right? Or pretend be ostriches and pretend like they're not experiencing it outside the school. On the other hand, you can't bring it all in, and nor should you.
No.
Cool. Great point, Dan. Who's next? Some key ideas that emerged from your small group discussion.
I guess I'll go.
What was meaningful to you? Tori, then James.
Okay, so Marie and I talked about the question, what are the positive and negative consequences of ordinary people producing media? And we thought of a lot of different positive consequences to that, such as if ordinary people are encouraged to make media, then more people are going to create it. It's as simple as that. If people are accepted and their artwork or whatever they created isn't criticized but critiqued in a positive way and accepted, more people are going to start making stuff and maybe find their passion or their stress reliever or an outlet to be creative. And we really struggled to find negative consequences, but the best thing we could come up with was if ordinary people are making so much media and there's not as much professionally made media, it might be hard to cut through the clutter to find something that was really well done and well made. But even that it was tough for us to come up with negative consequences.
Wow, great way to start us off, Tori. On that issue, anyone have thoughts about that issue of what are the negative consequences of ordinary people making media, potential negative consequences? Vanessa.
All right, so my thought is that I think this is a great idea that you don't look at it, with such a critical eye when it's an ordinary voice, but I don't think that's the reality. So I think that's a potential consequence, is that this exposure that people present themselves, right, present their stories through media, and it being heavily critiqued, just because I think that's the reality that we face. So I see that as a possible negative. And then in regard to the negative you were talking about, there's so much information out there. There's so much. And so to have even more, because everyone's making media, it would definitely be difficult to just find information and to evaluate. People already have trouble, right, evaluating information. So to have even more, it would be difficult, I think.
Great point. I like how you put some concern there about subjecting ordinary people to the world where not everybody is as nice as the people on Hit Record, right?
Right. Yep.
And I like your point about how much fragmentation can we have before we don't really have a common culture anymore, right? Because media has always been our common culture, because everybody goes to movies and everybody watches The Big Bang Theory and everybody, watches Oprah or whatever.
Yep.
And as that goes away, then fragmentation means it's harder and harder for us to relate to people who are not in our niche community. That has real dangers for public education and for public culture and for democracy. Whew. Cool. All right, James, I think you were up next. What came up in your conversation in your small group, and what key ideas emerged from your discussion?
In my group with Mary and I don't want to pronounce her name wrong, Luhanyan. And we were talking, actually, we all happened to be with Rengold, and we got into a discussion about how digital natives are essentially provided with these tools, and the naivete which, like in Rengold, there was a discussion of how at one point in time electricity and heating was, not taken for granted, and then, obviously became taken for granted. And use that as a reference to now where digital natives now have all these tools and affordances, and it's just common culture to them, and how to not even use it, but use it for basically social media practices, and not be able to discern with an overly critical eye, and especially with in engaging into the public. I get when what Rengold was mentioning, and how in that context, as say a blogger, for instance, would best engage and navigate some of the resources and within the community members of how they would represent themselves, the information that they're going to contribute, as well as critically analyze others in the community, and use other platforms to and followers of which they're gaining these resources from, and which was previously mentioned by someone where, if you have all this, this large, massive culture of ordinary people, how do you discern who is kind of an authoritative figure who has some kind of educational background that will provide you with these resources that you're basically going to use as building blocks in your argumentation? So
fascinating. There's a lot of ideas there. I heard one idea about how if you start using these tools when you're young, they become kind of invisible, and you use them without thinking very much, and you just accept it. It's like water. It's like electricity. You don't really appreciate it because it's so much a part of your life. It's so ordinary. And then really interesting idea there that toward the end of your comment about thought leadership, and how do people decide who they believe and who they trust, and how important it is for us to be out there in a public way with each other, relying on each other, because I can't be an expert about climate change and oceanography and digital literacy. No way, right? I have to rely on thought leaders to help me understand oceanography, right? Because I can't be an expert at everything. And what that means is that I have to count on other experts being public with their knowledge, and I have to be public with my knowledge. And that's a cultural shift from the ivory tower, which kind of locked up knowledge to the folks who would pay for it, right? Big shift. Howard Rheingold gives it all away for free. The whole book is online, right? You don't have to even pay for the book. It's there as a PDF copy. So he radically believes in that culture of sharing. So yeah, right. So we have time for one more comment. What you get out of your small group discussion? What key idea are you taking away from that experience?
I'll kind of tag on to what James said, because we also developed in our conversation the idea of how almost this guy was foreshadowing the use of Twitter and these social media platforms in the democratic process. And we talked about how the Twitter in particular, how it helped shape the presidential election, and how, using it as a marketing tool. Again, just because, and not to kind of stray from the idea, but just because you have books in your house doesn't make you literate, just because they're sitting there. If you have all of these things, you got to know how to use them. And we discussed that's why, countries who who aren't democratic block these. They don't want people to share this information in this kind of platform because of the power that it contains. And it proved that in our last presidential election, because he was able to market himself so well to the masses and address their naivete, again, we keep using this word, almost convincing them of what change could happen. And they fell for it. So,
yeah. Great observation, Mary. And you're also reminding us, and I guess this is where, it's so wonderful to have students, because I forget that the Howard Rheingold piece is written in 2008. That's almost 10 years ago, right? Like you said, that's way before Twitter began to be used as a political tool, right? And I do think it's really interesting to think about how with technologies, we always go through this period of great expectation and hope. And then we realize that actually the technology is never gonna cure human nature. And we have to basically bring our full humanity into an interplay for these tools to achieve their democratic potential.
Well, and I don't even know if that was Twitter's purpose when it was created, to be a tool such as this. But as people used it, they're the ones who forced it into that kind of a tool. So who knows what kind of tool is out there now that's going to be in its place, and giving kids those competencies to understand how they need to look at these and decide which one to use and know how to use it. I think is essential. So
nice. Okay, so I actually think that was a really great way for us to get some synthesis on at least 3 big foundational ideas that we've been exploring this semester about democratizing authorship through digital forms and reshaping the way we think about our participation in culture and the very idea of what culture is. So now let me just take a few minutes and get you to think about what's happening next. Okay, so the main thing that's happening is you're en route to completing a Screencast Ignite presentation and a final paper project. And just to go down to the very bottom and review those deadlines with you, the Screencast Ignite presentation, it's not due next Monday, right? It's because that's the 24th, 25th, 26th, 27th. It's due next Thursday. So our last class is going to be next Monday. And Thursday, your Screencast Ignite presentation will be due. And then final project due May 5th. So just a reminder that if you go back up to the top here, there's lots of ideas for you about how to prepare an Ignite screencast presentation, right? A little bit about the technical aspects and a little bit of examples of students who have done this kind of work before. On the final paper project, obviously you have a lot of choices, right? And do take a look at the criteria for evaluation as you're working on your project. Make sure you're doing something that allows me to use these criteria. So connecting the work to the ideas explored in this course, making connections to the course readings, discussions, and activities, completing work that's appropriate for graduate level work, doing work that enables you to develop one of the learning outcomes for this course, and you can click on those learning outcomes and learn more about them. And then making sure that the work is coherent, creative, and complete, using the conventions of the genre that you're producing in or creating in, and tweeting a link to your final work. So what questions do you have about the Screencast Ignite and the final paper project? All right, so you know that if you do have a question, what's the—
I have one.
Mary, okay, Mary has a question.
Okay, so you would like us to use Screencast-O-Matic, or is there if we have another tool?
Yep, you can use any tool you want.
Okay. All right, cool.
Use any tool you want to complete a screencast. Thanks for asking that question. Who's got another question? Dan.
I have. Go ahead, Dan.
So just in light of our contact today, Renee, where on the website to find your phone number? That's the only thing.
Oh. It's in the paper syllabus. But
Okay.
here, you write it down. I'm going to give it to you right now. Yes, you guys can call me anytime this week. My schedule is like completely open all week long. So I'm dying to talk to you about your final project. And you can reach me by phone anytime. I mean, not after 9 p.m., okay? 978-201-9799. Thanks for asking that, Dan, because we have been trying to connect, but haven't done so quite yet. Anita, did I see your hand raised? No.
I have
other questions about the final project. James.
Yes, I actually came across an article by Troy Hicks, and I read it in his adaptation on the 4 C's, and it actually, I found a link, part of his article, and it brought me to Creative Commons. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Sure.
Sure. And I thought it was great because it reminded me of Hit Record in a sense, but for kind of, for academics in a journal, like the same kind of foundational format, which is great.
Right.
And I had a question regarding, because I really was interested in using the TPAC, probably one of the PDI frameworks, but I don't know if I've never really adapted anybody else's framework before, or how, to be within, I haven't, what is it? Not the credentials. Trying to think of, actually it's right. Oh, the licensure. What, to pick what licensure if it falls under. I was just wondering, I know I'm really vague about this and I haven't had a chance to really explore Creative Commons a little bit more and read about what licensure I fall under. I think, it's pretty explanatory in that sense. But if I could just, in making an adaptation of somebody else's framework, can I just cite that, or I've never done this before as far as a research.
Got it. So here's the way it works in academe, right? We stand on the shoulders of giants, right? So everything that we read or everything that we take in, we sort of rework in our own way, and then we create something. And usually the thing we create is not the exact thing that we read. It's something different. So you're perfectly free to take something that you learned about the TPAC model with the PDI framework and the Troy Hicks thing and put it together and make something new. And that's transformative. So that's protected under fair use. So you don't need to worry about licenses or any of that stuff because you're creating something new, right? Mm-hmm. Now, if you're going to use somebody else's model the way it is, then in academic work, our norms are you simply cite it, right? You simply cite it. So now, if you are interested in learning more about Creative Commons, that would, of course, be a very cool project because Creative Commons is the strong protection for digital authors. And that would be a topic if you wanted to learn more about. You could do that for your final project if that's a topic that interests you. So I don't know if that was more clear, but James, I'm happy to talk with you more offline about that. And because we're coming to the end of our time period, if you guys have other questions about your final paper project, tweet me, call me. We'll schedule time or we'll just talk when you call. But I want to talk a little bit about what we're going to be doing next week. Oh, wait a sec. Before I share my screen, what are we going to be doing next week? Well, the most important thing that I'm going to be doing next week is I maintain a tradition. I've been teaching for 35 years, right? So I have a very long-standing tradition, which is that I produce a visual synthesis of the entire course as a comic book. Yes, I do! It's one-page comic book but it's a comic book with all the ideas of the course drawn in pictures. I've been doing this since the 90s, and it's a way for me to see how, even though I teach sometimes the same course, like, I'm different. So the course is different because as I learn, the course changes, and I keep them on my bulletin board, and I can track over time how I'm thinking differently because of you guys. So next week I will share with you my visual synthesis of the entire course, which is, of course, a lot of fun for me. Right? And hopefully it won't be terrible for you, but that's obviously something to look forward to. And I want you to do one more little exploration, right? So here's the things I'd like you to, here's the thing I'd like you to do a little bit before April 24th, which is our last class on Monday. I want you to spend a little bit of time exploring this website, DIY.org, co-founded by Andrew Slowinski. Okay, let's just take a look at that website for just a minute. It's actually kind of a little bit like a hit record for kids. It's a safe online community for kids to discover new passions, level up their skills, and meet fearless geeks just like them. Okay? Ooh, sorry. What did I do there? So it's a little bit like Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts. You can discover new skills, try hundreds of challenges. You can get peer feedback, right? And you can earn patches, right? So you can earn the laser cut patch display. You can learn patches in topics of all kinds. It's a creative community for children ages 8 to 16, right? So I want you to join the community and explore it a little bit.
Now that I've talked about it, chemist was his first thing that he was super excited about. And we had a bunch of Legos, and this was before Minecraft was on DIY, but he was super excited about building a density tower and those types of things. And that was, you have those moments where you, for a split second, you envision your son 20 years from now. And what is he? Is he a game designer? Is he a chemist? And these are moments that are not super important, but it's fun to have sometimes.
So the DIY community is really interesting, and I only want you to spend about 45 minutes. So unlike hit record where you had to really invest, I just want you to explore the site briefly. And then I think what we're going to try to do in our last class is try to figure out, why is creative learning getting more attention now? Can creative learning really help promote school reform? Why or why not? How can creative learning demonstrate measurable impact for accountability purposes? What are the pros and cons of badges as an approach to measuring digital authorship? Do online creative communities have a place in formal education? And what are the similarities between DIY.org and hit record, right? Now, if you attended the 2016 Summer Institute, I would like you to make a 90-second comment as you look back on the last 9 months. So the questions I'd like you to answer in the Flipgrid are, what do you remember most about your experience at the 2016 Summer Institute in Digital Literacy? How have you used what you learned? What's your most significant accomplishment in advancing digital literacy since you finished the Summer Institute? If you haven't experienced the Summer Institute and you're here for the graduate certificate in digital literacy, now is time for you to register. And of course, I didn't put the link there, but I will pretty soon. So in case you want to learn more about Andrew Slowinski, he's a very cool guy, and he's the guy who created DIY.org, the hit record for kids. You can learn more about him here. But at this point, I think you have a clear sense of what you're going to be accomplishing this week. Give me a thumbs up if you kind of get what we're up to this week. Yeah, we're steaming toward the finish line where your creative work is going to be the center stage for the next 2 weeks or 2.5 weeks or so. And that means that we're growing something wonderful. So did we do our growing thing? Did we do that last week? We did that last week. Oh, shoot. Oh, darn. I need a new one. Okay, so that means let's do our head-scratching thinking. Our head-scratching thinking as we get ready for the end of the semester, all right? Keep up the good work, you guys. I'll see you next Monday. Have safe. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Good night.